Hello, and welcome to Bedtime Stories. My name is Frank Padour, and I'll be reading to you a Grimm Brothers fairy tale entitled The 12 Brothers. Many years ago lived a king and queen who had 12 sons, all bright, intelligent lads, but they were not quite happy, although they loved each other very much. For one day, the king had told his wife that as he now had 12 sons, if a daughter should be born, all the sons would die, and their sister alone inherit his kingdom and riches. So the king had 12 coffins made in readiness for his sons, in case his next child should be a daughter. These coffins, which contained their grave clothes, were filled with shavings, and locked up in a private room, the key of which the king gave to the queen, praying her not to speak of it to the boys. But this dreadful preparation made the poor mother so unhappy that she wept for a whole day, and looked so sad that her youngest son noticed it. He had the Bible name of Benjamin, and was more often with his mother than the rest. "Dear mother," he said to her, "why are you so sorrowful?" "My child, I cannot tell you," she replied, but the boy was not satisfied, and he allowed her no rest till she unlocked the door of the private room and showed him the 12 coffins. "Dearest Benjamin," she said, "these coffins are for you and your brothers, for if you should ever have a little sister, you will all die and be buried in them." She wept bitterly as she told him, but her son comforted her and said, "Do not weep, dear mother. We will take care of ourselves and be far away from here before that time arrives." Then she took courage and said, "Yes, it will be better for you all to go away and remain for a time in a forest near to a hill, from whence you will be able to see the tower of the castle. If I should have a little son, a white flag shall be hoisted, and then you may venture to return home. But if you see a red flag, you will know it is a girl, and then hasten away as fast as you can, and may heaven protect you. Every night I will rise and pray for you, that you may not suffer from hunger or thirst, or the cold in winter, and the heat in summer." Then she blessed all her sons, and they went away into the forest, while each in turn mounted a high tree daily to watch for the flag on the tower. 11 days passed, and it was Benjamin's turn to watch. He saw the flag hoisted, and it was red, the signal that they must die. The elder brothers were so angry at finding that, to save their lives, they were to be banished from their home in consequence of a maiden's birth, that they vowed in revenge to destroy the first maiden whom they meet in the forest. However, as they must still hide themselves, they went still farther into the forest to find shelter. Strange to say, they had not traveled far before they came upon a most pleasant little cottage, neatly furnished and uninhabited. "We will make this our home," they said, "and Benjamin, as you are the youngest and weakest, you shall stay at home and keep house, while we go out and procure food." So they wandered about the forest shooting hares, wild rabbits, pigeons, and other birds, and Benjamin gathered acorns, nuts, and berries, or whatever could be found for food. In this cottage they lived for 10 years happily together, so that time passed quickly, but they heard nothing from home. During this time, their little sister was growing a great girl. She had a sweet disposition, and was very beautiful to look upon. She wore rich clothes and a golden star on her forehead. One day, when she was about 10 years old, she discovered in her mother's wardrobe 12 shirts. "Mother," she exclaimed, "whose shirts are these? They are much too small for my father." The queen sighed deeply as she replied, "Dear child, these shirts belong to your 12 brothers." "12 brothers?" cried the little maiden. "Where are they? I've not even heard of them." "Heaven knows where they are," was the reply, "but they are wandering about the world somewhere." Then the queen took her little daughter to the private room in the castle, and showed her the 12 coffins which had been prepared for her brothers, and related to her, with many tears, why they had left home. "Dear mother," said the child, "do not weep. I will go and seek my brothers." So she took the 12 shirts with her, and wandered away into the forest. She walked for a whole day, and by evening began to feel very tired, till at last she saw a light in a cottage, and stepped up to the door and knocked. It was opened by a young boy, who stared with astonishment at seeing a beautiful little girl dressed in rich clothing, and wearing a golden star on her forehead. At last he said, "Who are you, and what do you want?" "I am a king's daughter," she said, "and I seek my 12 brothers, and I intend to search for them in every place under the sun till I find them. And these are their shirts," she added, opening her parcel. Then Benjamin knew that she was his sister, and said, "I am your youngest brother, Benjamin." On hearing this, the little maiden burst into tears, and they were tears of joy, for they kissed each other with deep affection, and they were for a time very happy. He made her rest by the fire, and gave her something to eat and drink, for she was very tired. At last, Benjamin remembered the vow made by his brothers, that the first young maiden they meet should die, because through a maiden they had lost their kingly rights, and he told his little sister about it. "I would willingly die," she said, "if by doing so I can restore my brothers to their rightful possessions." "But I do not fear anything so sad will happen," he replied, "if I explain to them before they see you, and I hear them coming," he continued. "Just hide yourself in this room till after supper, and I will see what can be done." So the maiden hid herself where she could hear all that was said. Presently, the brothers returned from hunting, but the youngest would not speak about his sister till he had prepared the supper. While they sat at table, one of them said, "Well, Benjamin, have you any news to tell us?" "Perhaps I have," he said, "although it seems strange that I, who stay at home and keep house, should know more than you who have been out in the world." "Well, tell us your news," said one, and they all looked very eager. So he said, "I will tell you, if you make one promise." "Yes, yes," they all cried. "What is it?" "Well, then, promise me that the first maiden you meet within the forest shall not die." To this they all readily agreed, and the eldest said, "I will take care that mercy shall be shown to her." "Then," said the youngest brother, "our sister is here." And, rising, he opened the door of the inner room, and the king's daughter came forth in her royal robes, and with a golden star on her forehead, and looking so fair and delicate and beautiful that the brothers were full of joy, and kissed and embraced her with the fondest affection. She stayed with them for some time, and was a great help to the youngest brother in keeping the house clean and cooking the game which the others brought home. Everything was so nicely managed now, and with so much order. The curtains and the quilts were beautifully white, and the dinners cooked so well that the brothers were always contented, and lived in great unity with their little sister. There was a pretty garden around the house in which they lived, and one day, when they were all at home to dinner together, and enjoying themselves, the maiden went out into the garden to gather them some flowers. She had tended 12 lilies with great care, and they were now in such splendid bloom that she determined to pluck them for her brothers, and place one on each of their plates as a present. But the moment she brought the lilies in from the garden, her 12 brothers were changed into 12 ravens, and flew away over the trees of the forest, while the charming house and garden vanished from her sight. Now was the poor little maiden left all alone in the wild wood, and knew not what to do. But on turning to go, she saw a curious old woman standing there, who said to her, "My child, what hast thou done? Why didst thou not leave those white flowers to grow on their stems? They were thy 12 brothers, and now they will always remain ravens." "Is there no way to set them free?" asked the maiden, weeping. "No way in the world," she replied, "but one, and that is far too difficult for thee to perform, yet it would break the spell and set them free." Tell me," she cried. "I know I can do it, only tell me what it is." On hearing this, the old woman replied, "Hast thou firmness enough to remain dumb 7 years and not speak to anyone or even laugh? For if ever you utter a single word, or fail only once in the 7 years, all you have done before will be vain, and at this one word your brothers will die." "Yes," said the maiden, and she spoke from the heart. "I can do this to set my brothers free." The old woman left her after hearing her determination, and the maiden climbed into a tree, for she had no home now, and seating herself in the branches, began to knit. For 3 days she remained here, living on the fruit that grew on the tree, and without laughing or uttering a word. At the end of 3 days, as she sat in her tree, she saw the hunters pass near, and the king, who was hunting with them, had a favorite hound who very soon discovered her, ran to the tree on which the maiden sat, sprang up to it, and bayed and barked at her violently. The king, on this, came nearer, and saw with surprise the beautiful king's daughter with the golden star on her forehead sitting among the branches. He was so struck with her beauty that he begged her to come down and asked her to be his bride. She did not speak a word, but merely nodded her head. Then the king himself climbed up into the tree, and bringing her down, seated her on his own horse and galloped away with her to his home. The marriage was soon after celebrated with great pomp, but the bride neither spoke nor laughed. When they had lived happily together for some years, the king's mother, a wicked witch, came to visit them, and she soon began to raise wicked reports about the queen, and to set her husband against her. "I dare say it is some beggar girl you have picked up," she said one day. "Who can tell in what wretched home she may have been trained? Of course she can't help being dumb. Why does she never laugh, unless she has a guilty conscience?" The king at first would listen to none of these suspicions, but she led him on by degrees, and accused the queen of such wicked conduct, that at last he gave up his beautiful wife to be burnt to death. If she could have spoken to defend herself, the king might have saved her, but she remained silent to save her brothers, and so he concluded she was guilty. On the day of the execution, the king stood weeping at a window overlooking the court of the palace, where the stake had been erected, for he still loved her dearly. He saw her brought forth and tied to the stake, the fire kindled, and the flames with their forked tongues creeping towards her, when suddenly a rustling noise of wings was heard in the air. 12 black ravens alighted on the earth, and instantly assumed their own forms. They were the brothers of the queen. The last moment of the 7 years had expired. The enchantment was broken, and they arrived in time to save her. The fire was quickly extinguished. The queen, when led by her brothers to the king, was able to speak to him, and to smile in joy at being allowed to explain the cause of her silence. The delight of the king was only equaled by his anger against the wicked witch, who was brought to justice, and ordered to be thrown into a vat of oil full of poisonous snakes, where she died a dreadful death. That was a Grimm Brothers fairy tale entitled The 12 Brothers. Thank you for listening. Good night and sweet dreams.